Hello, I'm Simon Lindgren. I'm professor of sociology at Umeå University in Sweden, and I'm interested in social network aspects of the internet and also discursive analysis of internet cultures.
The New Noise book.
Yeah, the new noise.
Yeah, I think the inspiration for that book was the fact that there's this debate within internet research that's been ongoing about whether there's a positive outcome of social media in terms of democratization, collaboration, creativity, people becoming more free, basically freer, more able to organize themselves and to sort of circulate their own content and things like that. And on the other hand, there are these perspectives on surveillance and on commercialization and on targeted advertising and things like that. And of course, in reality, it can be both of those sides. But I thought there was very much of a divide where some people were writing about the good stuff and some people were writing about the bad stuff. So I thought it was need for a book which tried to bridge this somehow. I think one of the key points has to do with arguing for the need for empirical studies of these things. I'm not saying I'm the only one doing this, of course, but there has been a tendency where internet research has been quite theoretical, especially in the early days, where there's this description of what society are we going to end up in, and some people sort of guess more or less that it will be a participatory society, and other people guess that it will be a surveillance society. But in fact, we see more and more today that sometimes the better things come out as on the winning end, so to speak, and sometimes the problems become more dominant. So I think the point I'm trying to make in the book, also showing this through case studies, is that we need to study from case to case, from context to context, to see when do these platforms work and for what are they working, and what are the problems or pitfalls, so to speak, when are they failing to move beyond some sort of traditional mass communication model. I tend to write in the daytime because I have a family and children and things like that, so I need to do the work during office hours, basically. And actually, I've always been, I think that it's the kind of person you are as well. I've never been much about working at night or in the evenings, but I think I'm the most creative in the sort of before lunch. So when I have writing projects to do, I try to do the writing, like, say, between 9 o'clock and 12 o'clock, and that's about as much you can do in a day, I think, as for actual writing. So I tend to try to have that type of routine. So, and to be very sort of persistent and systematic about it. So yeah, I think that sort of sums up the process.
Yeah.
I would say two dimensions here. First, this book consisted of some development of theory. So then the preparations were basically reading up on other theories, reading other books within the same field, and getting to know the key concepts and positioning myself in relation to those. And but the book also then included case studies. So then the preparations were more like doing the empirical work with the case studies and carrying out those analyses and so on. So and how I organized the idea as well. I think well, kind of traditionally, I maybe sometimes writing by hand, sometimes on the computer, but some sort of idea going from a more general structure that can be uh, a list of bullet points or a number of headings and so on, and then sort of building from that, getting all the pieces of the puzzle in place gradually. So yeah.
So you will take notes?
Yeah, I take notes, but I've always had a problem with taking notes, because as soon as I start taking notes, I want to start to write as well. So I think there's no really clear distinction between a note-taking phase and a writing phase, because if I read something and I find something interesting, and I start taking notes about that, I'm already starting to think about what I should write about it myself and so on. So I would say note-taking is some sort of it's a brief intermediary step between doing the writing and doing the preparations or the research, I would say. So I'm not a very good note taker, because I want to start to write immediately. So I think my writing is a form of sort of note taking.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, sort of. I guess you always hope that many people will read it and many people will like it and cite it and use it. And yeah, of course, being an academic book of the type that it is, of course, there are no massive reactions to it, but people who have read it, people who have used it, and have been in contact with me, yeah, they have reacted in the way that I hope. They find it useful, both as an overview of the field and for finding some sort of approaches or methods to inspire them in their own research. So, yeah, I think it was sort of the reaction I hoped for. I tried to develop some sort of theory about what I call digital disruption, like using the metaphor or the notion of disruption for these things that might happen online, where traditional ways of doing things are disrupted or become disturbed or sort of dislocated in various ways. When, for example, some the relationship between an author and the reader might be disrupted, or the relationship between an expert and an amateur, and or between young people and old people, or between politicians and citizens. So that was sort of the metaphor that I wanted to use to say that, well, it's not necessarily a massive transformation of society that's happening through digitization, but it's a potential for these disruptions happening. And actually, this was influenced by Dick Hebdige, his book Subculture, that he wrote in the late 70s about the punk movement, where he also used this metaphor where he said the subculture is noise, it's a disturbance. So, I mean, there's this talk of new media and what it might create in terms of social transformations. So I think the new came from the new media dimension of things, and the noise dimension came from this disruptive element. And also, of course, it's a catchy title. Both words start with an N, and so on. So yeah, it sounds cool. I've been interested in myself in trying to find a way of combining quantitative and qualitative approaches to analyzing text, because I come from the field of qualitative text analysis myself, and when I started working with digital things like online stuff, you realize that it's quite easy to get a hold of large materials. Like you can have thousands of tweets or very many blog posts and things like that. And the question was then, how should I approach this? Because I can't close read everything. I can't do this like line by line analysis. And also like traditional content analysis, which is more about counting words and occurrences of various elements in a text, seemed kind of too basic, not really catching the dynamics. So I started reading up on network analysis, like text network analysis, and also on like some aspects of computational linguistics and things like that, and developed this sort of methodological. It's not necessarily a new innovation, but a combination of different tools that makes it possible to study large amounts of text while still retaining some sort of qualitative approach in how you code it and deal with it. So basically it's about altering between quantitative network analysis of a large text data set and doing qualitative readings of small parts of it. So that was sort of the history behind that I basically identified this need myself to be able to say something about a large amount of text without having to read everything. Yeah, I mean, the opportunity with Facebook is, of course, that people can network in a very powerful way. Because when you have this platform that a very large percentage of the population in the Western world, or maybe globally, is using, you get this advantage of a very sort of complex network. And I mean, these theories, for example, about the 6 degrees of separation and small world networks, saying that the sort of distance from between any two people in this network, no matter where they are on the globe, can be quite short in terms of how many clicks or how many jumps, so to say. So if people would like to then mobilize to come together around a common interest, or to sort of push for a certain political issue or things like that, this network becomes very powerful, both for like doing some sort of activism or for collaborating on any other creative things. So that's of course something good, because this wasn't possible before these media existed. This was much sort of less dense networks and much longer times for sending letters or keeping in contact in that way. So it didn't have nearly anywhere close to the power that this network has. But still, then of course the problem with this is that it's on a corporately owned platform, and people it might be some sort of it becomes streamlined in terms of people having to use that specific platform to achieving the things that they do. Maybe they don't see the other opportunities that there might be in going outside of that platform, and also this whole surveillance aspect of things, and the aspect of who owns your creations and things like that. So I mean, it's this sort of double-edged sword kind of thing with this media, that and I would agree with David Gauntlet there, as he writes in the Making is Connecting book, that one thing doesn't necessarily sort of exclude the other. People can do these creative things even though it's a commercial platform. We need to sort of keep our eyes on both sides of things. I know that Christian Fuchs has been quite critical of the notion of participatory culture, as it sort of obscures several dimensions of what these things might be about. What is actually participation, and it has, of course, dimensions of people doing this free labor and things like that. So yeah, I think I basically agree with his criticisms of that concept. I mean, the way that participatory culture sort of theoretical package has been sort of put forward, it's very simplified. It makes some very important points about people like learning new skills in digital culture, about people using popular culture and maybe being able to translate some of these skills into other projects that might be more political in their character and so on. But of course also the criticism where Christian's writings are part of that, saying that well, what is described by some scholars as participatory culture needs to be seen in terms of like the economic conditions that surround it. So I think that sort of aligns with my idea that we discussed before, that we need, of course, to study from case to case, that there's this potential for participation, that when does it actually happen and who benefits from it.